Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to a very fun on-theme sewing project for my recent trip to Italy. Hi friends, we are back with another sewing video, and this video is actually an old archive sewing video that I never got around to releasing, mainly because I originally filmed it in the fall in September in Wisconsin for a trip to Italy where it was going to essentially be like summertime, and the print of this project just really did not fit what I was creating on my channel for the fall. So I'm excited to finally release it just in time for summer, and hopefully this dress in this tutorial will give you all of the summer inspiration. So stay tuned for all the details and I hope you enjoy. So my husband and I are going to Italy for 11 days. This is technically like our honeymoon because we weren't able to go on an international trip right after we got married this summer. So we're super excited about this, and as a seamstress and sewist and someone who loves fashion, I obviously have been deep in the throes of sewing things for this trip. Italy just has so much inspiration when it comes to like fashion, dressing in theme, creating things that fit and match where I'm going to be going and where I'm going to be visiting. And one of the places that we're going to be staying is Sorrento along the Amalfi Coast. Most of our trip is actually along the Amalfi Coast, and something that the Amalfi Coast and Sorrento are known for are lemons. The coast of Italy is very known for their lemons and lemon groves and limoncello. And so obviously I wanted to make something that's very much in theme for that. So we're gonna make a lemon dress. For this specific sewing project, I'm actually using a FREEE pattern from Mood Sewing Society. If you didn't know, Mood Fabrics, yes, the fabric store from Project Runway, has a blog where they provide free sewing patterns. They come out with a couple every month, and their latest sewing pattern is a gorgeous dress. I just think this is such a fun style. So you can actually go print it out for yourself. It's totally free. Follow this video and make it for yourself in whatever fabric you would like. So like I said, this dress is all about lemon theme. I was at Joann Fabrics a couple weeks ago, perusing the fabric, saw some lemon fabric, and decided, you know what, I need to make a dress. So I found this really pretty, very classic lemon fabric, and right next to it was a corresponding stripe. So we're actually going to try and combine these somehow together for this dress to kind of have a fun mixed print. Now the dress I'm using from the Mood Sewing Society is the Tamarind dress. There's not a picture of it here, but I'll post a picture of what it looks like. I really like this dress. The main thing that I was looking for in regards to making this lemon dress is a dress that had different sections to it, and specifically had like a bust section because I wanted to do some mixed prints. And so I really liked how this dress was set up in regards to its different sections and its style. I am going to be adding straps to this, so that's another option for you. This dress, that pattern that you can print out, is made in ladies sizes 00 to 32. So we're gonna tape it all together, cut it out, and get sewing our Amalfi Coast lemon dress.
Alright, first things first is to assemble the printed PDF pattern and then cut the specific size that you want to sew. I'm pretty sure that I sewed my dress on a size 8, so a lot of those extra lines got cut off. Something that these free Mood patterns don't give you is that they don't give you a pattern layout for how each pattern piece needs to be laid on your fabric, so you really need to be familiar with the different markings on pattern pieces so that you know how it should be laid out on the fabric.
Alright, this is the layout of the dress. The skirt pattern I folded in half. It's actually double this, but if you fold it in half and place it on a fold, you don't have to have your entire piece of fabric open, so it's saving me a little bit. I also wanted it to be a little bit shorter because I'm trying to have this more of a midi length. Same thing for the front top tier of the skirt. This pattern piece is actually double wider than this, and you saw that in the last clip, but I folded it in half so I could place it on the fold. So remember, anything that's like double, you can always fold it in half and place it on a fold. That's the center back. And then all of the bodice pieces, which I am also going to cut out of yellow fabric and line them. And then I'm going to cut some of them out of the striped fabric to see if I like how it's going to look.
And now it's time to cut out all of my pattern pieces. This is where it's really important to pay attention to what is written on each pattern piece to figure out how many pieces you need to cut, if you need to cut it out of a lining fabric, and if it's place on a fold or cut on the grain line.
Okay, so you're into a quick issue. I'm supposed to cut 2 of these because it is a skirt and you need a front and a back. And if I had cut this out how I was planning on, it would not have worked. So we are going to move all these pieces over here into this extra, and we're gonna see if we can turn this pattern piece sideways and put it right there to get 2 pieces.
Alright, and we are back at the cutting. For the bodice of this dress, there are a lot of pieces that create the fitted portion of the bodice and the bust section, in addition to the overlay that is gathered. So there are a lot of pieces to cut, in addition to the fact that I am trying to do some mixed prints for my dress. So not only is my lining going to be yellow, so I am cutting those pieces out again for my lining, but I am also going to be cutting out some pieces out of a striped fabric for kind of my contrasting print. If you're not doing mixed prints, everything essentially can be cut out of the same fabric. I'm also adding some of my own style tweaks to this pattern, one of which is adding little tie straps. So I'm going to just use my striped fabric to create those straps. I'm making them 2 inches wide, and then I'm also adding kind of some bias pops of striped fabric between the 2 panels of my skirt and also under my bust. I don't remember how long these were, but I'm pretty sure that I just cut a lot of strips that were 2 inches wide and then just cut them down to the length I needed them to be. This is not part of the original pattern, this is just my own tweaks that I made along the way. The first step in our construction process is to sew the bodice lining pieces together. This is going to be the front side bodice lining piece that we are connecting to the center front bodice lining. The center front pieces have to be sewn together in the front, and then we are sewing down those curves for the bust lines. Then we are going to do the same thing for the lining pieces. We are going to match up the notches that are on the pattern pieces, pin them together, and sew them. So make sure you're cutting out the notches on this pattern. That's going to be super helpful. And again, all of these pieces are going to be the inside lining of our dress. Then we are going to sew and attach the outer bodice pieces. You might notice that these pieces are a little bit longer. That's because we are going to eventually gather them. So using the same method, we are going to sew down the center to connect those center front bodice pieces. We are going to match up the notches for the curved bust lines, and then we are going to also match up the notches for the torso area. Then we are going to take all of those pieces for the bodice lining and then the bodice outer shell and sew them together where we pin them. Again, those are going to be all those notches that we matched up for the curves of our bust and then the lines of the torso section of our bodice. The seam allowance for this pattern is 5/8 inch seam allowance. So we are going to sew all of those up, and then we are going to go press those seams open at our iron. As you sew the bust pieces for the top of the dress, keep in mind that these are going to be sewn along a curve, so make sure that you are slowly pivoting and turning your fabric along that 5/8 inch seam allowance line as you are sewing it. Once those seams are sewn, we are going to press them open at our iron. Since our bodice is going to be lined, there's no need to finish any of those raw edges. We just want to make sure our seams are nice and pressed so that they will lay really well. Next, it's time to attach the bust cups to the torso for the lining section of our bodice. We are going to match up that center seam with the top center peak of kind of the torso section, and then we are going to slowly pivot the under bust cups along the curves of that yellow fabric here in my video. And you want to make sure and match up those seams that run across the curve of the bust to the seams right below it. We are going to repeat that same process for the outer section of our bodice, except the bust area of the top of our dress is going to be gathered. So I've already put my basting stitches in. If you need to learn how to gather and do basting stitches, I will link a video in the description of this tutorial, but I am loosely gathering those seams so that their length matches the bottom panel. Now, I did add in my own tweak here. I wanted to add in some of that striped fabric, so this is just some bias tape that I'm sandwiching in between the top gathered section and then the bottom lemon panel, so I am going to just pin all 3 of those layers together, making sure that my gathers are spaced evenly so that those seams of the top bust section kind of match up with the seams on the bottom panel, and then that center seam we also want to make sure and correctly match up to that center peak. We are then going to sew where we have just pinned, so that's going to be the lining of the front bodice. Again, you're going to be sewing some curves here, so just sew slowly with your 5/8 inch seam allowance, and then when you get to that center seam, you might have to do a little bit of a pivot. We are going to repeat that same method for the outer portion of our bodice. This time we are going to be sewing over our gathers, so make sure to just take your time on this as you are sewing curves and might have to pivot at that center portion. And this is what the lining of the front of our bodice is going to look like. Now that our front portion of our bodice is sewn together, we are going to sew the side panels, which are going to become the back of our bodice. We're going to match up those notches on the side. There should be 2 notches, match them, pin them along the sides, and then those are going to get sewn together. After you pin the wider side panels, then there are narrower back panels that also need to get pinned to those sides. We're going to do the same thing for the front of our bodice. This is what the main outer portion of our dress looks like, but before we pin the sides, we also need to gather the top section of our bust area. So you're going to just loosely gather those basting seams, and then you are going to match up those notches for the side back panels. I left the edges of my gathers for that top section untied so that I could adjust them when attaching the lining to the bodice, so that was a helpful tip. And then don't forget those additional back panel pieces. So you're going to do 2 different side seams for the outer section of your bodice and for the lining. Then you are going to sew all of those seams with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Something else to note is that the original directions for this pattern have you put boning into the bodice, and I opted to not integrate that into my bodice. While I was at my sewing machine, I decided to sew up my little tie straps. Again, this is a style detail I edited myself using 2-inch wide sections of striped fabric that were probably about 1.5 feet long, and then I just flipped them right side out. I needed my straps to be done before I attached the lining to the front portion of my bodice, so I'm going to match up those straps with the seams along the bust on the front and then the seams along the back, and then I'm just going to be matching up all of those seams along the lining with the same seams on the outside of my bodice to make sure that everything is even and lays as it should. Making sure to match up all of the seams is how you get the best layout for this. And make sure that if you're adding straps, you sandwich them in between the 2 layers. Then it's time to sew everything that we just pinned. We are going to sew that on a 5/8 inch seam allowance, taking out our pins as we go and gently pivoting around the corners. After we sew it, we are going to flip it right side out, and then we are going to give those top seams a nice press so that all of our curves start to lay really well, the gathers along our bust start to lay really well, and then it's time to move on to the skirt. The first step in constructing our skirt is to sew together the skirt top tier. The skirt has 2 tiers, and for the top tier, we first need to attach our pockets. For the back section of the top tier, it comes in 2 pieces, and there are notches on the side. We are going to match up the notches on our pocket pieces with the notches on the top tier of the skirt. We're going to place those pockets right sides facing, matching up the notches, and then pinning those along the sides of the back skirt tier pieces. We are then going to do the same thing for the front tier of our skirt. The front top tier of the skirt is 1 piece that I folded in half to cut on a fold and more easily do my fabric layout. So that 1 piece, you are going to also notice there are notches on the side, and that is where we are going to pin our pockets just like the back pieces, matching up the notches right sides together. After the pockets are sewn, you're going to flip the pockets out to the right side, and then you are going to take the back sections and you are going to match them up right sides together with the front top tier, matching up those pockets and pinning down and around. You're going to repeat this for the left side, matching up the pockets and pinning down and around. After the pockets are done, we need to attach the front bottom tier of our skirt to the back bottom tier of our skirt. So these are two large square pieces. We are going to be matching up these sides, pinning them, and sewing them together. Then it's time to sew up our pockets. This is what the process for sewing our pockets look like. We are going to sew down and then around our pocket and back down so that it creates kind of an opening in the side of our dress. So that's for the top tier. Next, we need to sew the side seams for the bottom tier of our skirt. This is a super easy long seam on a 5/8 inch seam allowance. When those are done, I'm going to finish any of my raw edge seams with my serger. You can use a serger or a zigzag seam finish or any other variation of seam finish that you choose. Then we are going to take that top tier over to our iron and press those outside seams. We're doing this so that we can shift and move our pocket over to one side, press those outside seams, and now we have our handy dandy magical little pocket. I'm also going to press the side seams of the bottom tier of my skirt open, and I actually use the selvage edge of my fabric so I didn't have to finish those raw edges, but if your fabric has a raw edge, make sure to finish it. After that, we are going to take the back top tier sections and we're going to match up those double notches at the back, and just so that bottom section, press that open. The top needs to be left open for the zipper. So now our top tier is all connected together, and we are going to go add in a basting stitch to the top of that tier and also a basting stitch to the top of our bottom skirt tier. These are going to be turned into gathers. Again, if you need a refresher on gathering or don't know how to gather, I will link a video tutorial in the description of this video where I show you exactly what I am doing here. Now, before gathering my top tier, I decided to attach my bottom tier of my skirt to my top tier. I did add in a striped embellishment here, so that is added in, sandwiched between both layers, and taking my bottom section of my skirt, I'm going to just gather that all the way around until the gathers are even with the bottom edge of my top tier. Sandwiching my striped embellishment, I am going to match up the side seam of my top tier with the side seam of the gathered top edge of my bottom tier of the skirt. So we always want to start with our side seams and match those up, pin them, and then you're going to go match up the other side seam, pin those, and then keep pinning all the way around. And again, since I added in my own personal flair of the striped embellishment, I made sure to sandwich that in between, and then we're going to sew all the way around. After it's sewn, this is what my skirt is starting to look like. You now start to see the top tier with the bottom tier of the skirt. I also serged that raw edge to finish it. After my top and bottom tier are attached, I took it over to my iron to hem my skirt. I decided to do kind of a 1/2 inch hem. So essentially I folded up the bottom edge of my skirt 1/2 inch, pressed it, and then I'm going to fold it one more time 1/2 inch and press it. Depending on the length you want your skirt to be, you can adjust the hem of the skirt. After your hem is pressed, you are then going to take it over to your sewing machine and sew that hem into place. Next, it is time to gather the top edge of our top tier. So there's already a basting stitch in my top tier. I'm going to loosely gather that to the length of the bottom edge of my bodice. We are going to want to make sure to match up those side seams of my top tier with the side seams of my bodice to make sure everything evenly matches up and pins together, and then we are going to sew those gathers down, connecting the top of our skirt to our bodice, bringing this dress together. And this is what it looks like now that the skirt is attached to the bodice. Now, something that I forgot to mention, when you are attaching your skirt to your bodice, you are only wanting to sew your skirt to the main outside of your bodice. You're not wanting to sew it to the lining. That's because we are going to fold that bottom edge of our lining in, press it, and then we are going to pin that around the waist section of our dress and then stitch it down from the outside. So I first start by pinning it on the inside of my dress, and then I'm going to flip it outside so that I can then put pins on the right side of my fabric because that's where I'm actually going to be sewing. I'm going to be top stitching this by stitching in the ditch, so just making sure that the lining is already kind of secured into place with pins allows me to place my pins correctly on the right side of my fabric. Then you're going to want to make sure to remove the pins on the inside of your dress. A lot of people hand stitch their lining into their dress. I don't really like hand sewing, so I'm going to just do a top stitch to secure this lining into place using those pins that I placed on the outside of my dress. And here you can see I'm just sewing a seam between the top of my bodice and my skirt right in that ditch above the gathers. After this, I'm going to sew the back of my dress closed using a basting stitch because this is how we are going to place in our zipper. So I already fit the dress to myself, sewed the back together, pressed those seams open, and then this is me attaching in and sewing on my zipper. If you want to learn how to attach and sew a zipper just like this, it's called a concealed zipper or a standard zipper. I will link the tutorial for that in the description of this video because I show you step by step how to do it in a more slowed down pace. And this is now what the dress looks like from the inside with all my finished edges and my zipper and my lining, just all the pretty details.
So we finished the lemon dress today. It came out so good, like so cute. Definitely some things could easily be tweaked if I were to make it again because it is on a pattern that I made, but actually turned out really well and the vision I was looking for, so good. All right, the sun is really bright right now, but this is the lemon dress as best you can see it. It actually came out really well, and I used the stripe to contrast right here, and then under the bust, and then the stripes at the bust, and I added tie straps. It's like a midi length, so it's actually really cute.
And now it's time for the grand Italian reveal of my lemon dress, which I also specifically happened to make just to visit this famous lemon restaurant in Sorrento, Italy. It's called O Persiano La Favorite, and it was such a cool place to visit. I saw it on TikTok, and essentially you're eating in a lemon grove, so obviously I needed to wear a dress to match my surroundings, and I am so pleased and happy with how this dress turned out. It is just giving quintessential Sorrento, quintessential Italy, all of the summery lemon vibes, and I love it. I'm also so glad that I made some of my own style tweaks, like integrating mixed prints, adding in straps, and adding in the fun pops of stripes at the skirt and under the bust. So I hope that this video inspires you to try out this free mood sewing pattern for yourself, especially since they don't typically come with a lot of directions, and this video will hopefully give you more details on how to bring this dress to life for yourself. As always, thank you so much for watching my videos and supporting my channel. It means so much to me, and I am so looking forward to all of the summer sewing projects yet to be shared and on the horizon. Happy sewing and happy summer!